You're a great. There's biscuits. First, I'd like to say thank you very much to the organisers of this wonderful event. Thank you for inviting me to participate. It's such a great honour to be asked to speak alongside some really great colleagues and researchers. Friends, I'm not sure. It's a pleasure to be here. For the Deutsch sprechende Teilnehmer hier, ich sage, es tut mir leid, mein Deutsch reicht nicht, aber Maria wird Ihnen helfen, everybody. I will continue in English if that's okay. I can't speak Hungarian. I'm so sorry. But I've been asked to speak about supporting neurodiverse learners. This is my favourite subject, so I'm going to keep a close eye on the time, otherwise I will just keep talking about this. The ENGaGE project, I think, is such a valuable resource for teachers and for learners, in that the materials are set out in a way that is very accessible for them. But as English language teachers, I think it's really important to know that we're not just teaching language. We have an opportunity through our subject, and German teachers as well. We're not language teachers. We're not just teaching language. We are helping our students to become fully functioning adults in our global, in our multilingual world. And so there are some things that we can also help them to learn. Things like how they learn best, and how they manage their lives, how they succeed generally in life. And those are some of the things I want to talk about today. And of course, as language teachers, we focus on the 4 skills of language: reading, writing, speaking, listening, all wrapped up in vocabulary and grammar. These are the sort of fundamentals that we need to teach. And I think the ENGaGE materials and other materials do a great job of setting that out in a nice, clear way. But there are other things as well that students can learn. Sometimes they're called the soft skills. I usually call them learning skills, or even life skills. And there are so many. I haven't managed to put them all up here. I just put a few down just to let you understand what I'm talking about. Things like communication, things like teamwork. These are kind of soft skills that our learners also need to develop. And as they develop these learning skills, they will become more effective learners. So it's really in our interest as well to help our learners develop these. The ones I want to talk about today are self-awareness, which I think is very closely connected to self-esteem. I want to talk about memory strategy, because our neurodiverse learners often find that big barrier to their learning, that they just can't remember the new material. And I also want to talk about organisation. Again, because it's a big barrier to learning if our neurodiverse learners don't get to the right classroom at the right time, with the right books, and all those sort of personal organisation issues that they might experience. So these are the things that I want to focus on today in the next 20 minutes or so. Self-awareness, for me, is probably the most important quality that we can help our students develop. And research has shown that successful adults, so people leading successful lives as adults, often have a higher degree of self-awareness than those whose lives are perhaps, what can I say, more chaotic or, less successful. And as a teacher, I've often found that as well, that my students who are self-aware, they make better choices. So I work normally with older learners than school age. I work with young adults who are in college or at university, and sometimes I work with quite mature students at university. And the ones who know themselves and know what their strengths are and know where their limits are, those are the ones who make much better choices when it comes to choosing courses, choosing modules, deciding how to go about different tasks. And I do unfortunately have some students who have very low self-awareness and kind of expect everybody else to fill in the gaps for them. That's not really the route to independent adult life. So I'm always telling people, particularly when I get a chance to talk to school teachers, please start early with helping your students develop their self-awareness. And I mentioned that for me, self-awareness is very closely connected to self-esteem. And self-esteem, I think, is a very important element in the learning equation. And it's connected through self-reflection. And I don't know about the Hungarian context, but in the UK, reflection has become a key part of a lot of university courses. For example, when I work with trainee nurses, they have to keep a reflection diary. Nurses. They have to keep reflecting on their progress. And this is something that some students come to quite late and they don't really know how to go about reflection. So the earlier we start, I think, the better it is for our learners. Self-esteem, as I say, probably one of the most important elements in the learning equation. And certainly low self-esteem can be one of the biggest barriers to learning. I often have students who actually don't believe they can learn. And you know what? They're right. Until they believe that they can learn, they actually don't make much progress. So that's one of the first things that we need to work on, helping students to have that self-belief, that self-esteem. Because when they have low self-esteem, they have negative expectations, they're perhaps not willing to put in the effort, they're very anxious. And both of these things can lead to lack of success or failure. They start to blame themselves, and so we get into this downward spiral. So how can we avoid it? Well, if we know what the causes are of low self-esteem, we can maybe go some way to addressing them. And there are many causes of low self-esteem. Just a few here, maybe unrealistic expectations. Sometimes from the student themselves, sometimes from parents, sometimes from the school, the system, society generally, having unrealistic expectations that everybody will move forward at the same pace and everybody will achieve the same thing. Some students will have had negative learning experiences, and particularly if you're working with older learners, excuse me, as I am, they may have had several years, many years, of not achieving what they hoped to achieve. And all of these years of negative experiences build up and produce their self-esteem. There may have been comments from classmates or teachers, just chance comments. Maybe it wasn't even meant, maybe it was a joke, maybe it was ironic, but perhaps the student didn't interpret it that way. And these little comments can stick and affect our learners for a long, long time. I've had several students say to me that the teacher in the past had told them that they would never learn English. Some of those students actually took that as a challenge and worked so hard to prove that teacher wrong. So that had a positive effect. But some of those students, they accepted that as truth and they actually believed that they would never learn English. But I believe that everybody actually can learn another language. So we need to be careful about the chance comments. Or if we hear somebody else making a comment, we need to get in there and try and address it somehow. And another cause of low self-esteem is when students just compare themselves very superficially to their classmates. They see their classmates getting really good grades. They know that they're working really hard, but they're not getting the same grades. And so they start to feel bad about themselves, about their learning. But in fact, if they were to compare themselves in other ways, rather than just the numbers, the grades, if they were to compare themselves in terms of perseverance, in terms of creativity, in terms of problem-solving skills, or their social interaction skills, they might actually see that they have a big advantage over some of these classmates. Unfortunately, though, a lot of comparison in education is just about grades. So that is a bit of a problem. So then the question is, how can we boost self-esteem? And I think, as I've said, one of the ways is to get students reflecting on their learning. Because when they start to reflect and when they start to think more about how they learn and what they do, they will start to see positives. If they start to think about what they can do today that they couldn't do last week, they will see actually they have made progress. And if they think about the strategies that they've used to get there, they will see that they do have skills. This is a very simple reflection sheet that is part of some materials that we've been working on. with a Greek colleague actually called English Sounds Fun, designed to be accessible to all. And at the end of each lesson, we ask the students to think back and reflect on whether they can now do what we've asked them to do. So in this lesson, they were learning to recognise and produce the sound, and also to match that to one spelling pattern. So we just asked the students, do you think you can do this now? And we can do that in their first language. And I totally agree with what's been said about use as the first language. Really powerful learning tool. Why would we not use it? Particularly for things like reflection. So we can ask the students, can you do this now? Or do you need to practice a bit more? It's not a case of success or failure. It's a case of success now or success in the future. So we're being really positive. We're saying you are going to be able to do this. Maybe we need to practice a bit more, and that's absolutely fine. And we just get them into that mindset that, okay, I can't do it yet. I'll do a bit more practice like that. Other ways of boosting self-esteem would be to have little activities in the classroom, particularly with teenagers, making a video about how wonderful they are to get themselves hired for a local employer or something. Getting them to think about what's different about them, what's special about them, what talents do they have, what qualities. So you might need to teach a bit of vocabulary to do with how they can describe themselves. You might need to help them with the planning and the structuring, maybe with some of the technical aspects of it. You might discover that you have brilliant filmmakers in your class. And I think one of the nice things about this activity is that students start telling you things that they haven't shared before. Maybe they know how to ride a horse. Maybe they are brilliant at golf. Or, you know, they can talk to dogs, calm them down. You know, whatever skills or talents they have, it's a great way of bringing it into the classroom and sharing it with the other students as well, so that their classmates understand this is somebody who's got something really special to offer. And similarly, at the end of a lesson, it's nice, at the end of a course probably, it's nice to acknowledge what everybody has contributed, what's made that course particularly special. And it doesn't have to be, you know, thank you for always knowing the answers. It doesn't always have to be academic achievement. It could be thank you for always smiling in the mornings when I'm feeling sleepy. You wake me up. Or, yeah, the examples here, thank you for always sharing your paper with me, because I always forget my paper. Or whatever it is. So just everybody has to think about what they appreciate about somebody else in the class. And it's just a nice way of sharing that mutual appreciation. So these are just some examples of activities that we could do. As language teachers, we could actually, you know, use the language to develop the sense of self-esteem. Through self-awareness, basically, getting students to think about what they can do, how they do it, and what their achievements have been. So let me move on to talk about memory strategies and organisation now, because actually, as language teachers, we want our students to achieve language proficiency. And a lot of self-esteem comes from that sense of achievement, that sense of success, when you can say something that you couldn't say before, when you can understand something that you couldn't understand before. And as I said before, for our neurodiverse learners, dyslexic learners, dyspraxic learners, it's often the memory which is the big barrier. So if we can help them to develop memory strategies, so they remember their vocabulary from lesson to lesson, they remember how that grammar structure works, then they experience success in learning, their self-esteem goes up, their motivation goes up, we get into this positive cycle. So let me just give some suggestions for memory strategies. I always get my students to make little vocab cards, just literally just a small piece of card. On one side, they have the new English word that they're learning. On the other side, the word in their own language, or a picture, depending on their level of literacy. This is an example from a Swedish student who was trying to learn the word friend in English. So this is quite an elementary student. She's written the word friend. She's also written a little sentence for herself to remind herself, Eva is my best friend. Some students, when they're more advanced, they make a little note of how to pronounce the word for themselves, or they collect together vocabulary like unfriendly, friendship, or the new verb to unfriend. There's always new verbs coming out connected to social media. And on the other side, she's written two possible translations for herself in Swedish. So we have vän and kompis. It's very simple. For students who prefer maybe not to write, or maybe who haven't developed literacy practices, they could also do this on their phone or another recording device where they just speak the words and then give themselves a translation. And then whenever they've got a couple of minutes in the day, maybe they're waiting for coffee in the queue, or maybe they're waiting for a bus, they can just get their cards out, just have a quick click through, see which ones they can remember, see which ones they need to go back to. A little often is often the best way for neurodiverse learners. And I like this activity, it's quite tactile. You know, it gives them something concrete to hang on to. As I say, some students prefer the audio version, pop their headphones in and just listen again to the words. And what I will say about memory strategies is that there are many, many different ways of remembering, and nothing will work for everybody. So as teachers, we need to keep giving out suggestions for different things that students could do until our students find what works for them. And when they find what works for them, they can pick it up and they can run with it, they can work independently. And when they get to middle age and they find that their memories are not as strong as they used to be, they will thank you for those memory strategies that they can now use in daily life, even if they can't remember the Swedish word for friend. So, vocab cards is one way of doing it. Memory pictures is another strategy that I like, even though I'm not a great artist. And my students also enjoy this. So the idea is that if you have a word that's quite hard to remember, say the Swedish word, what's the Swedish word for friend? Vän. If you can't remember, it's hard to remember, maybe you can think, what does it sound like? So the Swedish word vän, for an English speaker, what does that sound like? Like a caravan? Yeah. Vän. Are there any mathematicians in the room? Yeah. For me, when I first heard this, I was like, that was like a Venn diagram. So my little memory picture for Venn is actually a little Venn diagram. And it's quite nice. It has the idea of this sort of connection, the overlap there in the middle, the friendship. So this is how I remember the Swedish word Venn, the Venn diagram. And I should say that the actual product, the picture itself, the quality of the picture is not important. It's the process that you go through when you think about what does it sound like? How can I combine that with something that I already know? I'm sure you also use mnemonics to tell yourself little silly stories of how to remember words. I know I used to do this at school, particularly when I was learning French, because French spelling is almost as crazy as English spelling, isn't it? And the thing about mnemonics, when you tell yourself a little silly story to remember the letters, the sequence of letters, it doesn't have to be in the target language. I'm very sure that when I was trying to remember how to spell French words, and I would come up with a little sequence of words in a story, it wasn't in French. It was in English. And I do think that encouraging students to use their own language is a really useful tool in their learning. Does anyone know what this picture represents? Does anyone know about the big elephants and the small elephants? No? So, we have a little story in English. Big elephants can always upset smaller elephants. If you take the first letter, big elephants can always upset small elephants. What do you get? Because, yeah. Because is one of those words that's actually quite tricky to spell because the letters get mixed up in the wrong order. So giving them a picture, talking about a picture, giving them a little story, that can help them to remember the sequence of words. But it's much more helpful, more powerful learning for them if they come up with their own. So here's a challenge. Can anyone come up with a little mnemonic to remember the spelling of then? Maybe Hungarian? Or German? Or English? I'll tell you what, I'll let you think about that. Come back to me at lunchtime. Other groups that I've worked with, somebody came up with this brilliant one, which is very amiable neighbour. Which again has this idea of a friendship starting with a very amiable neighbour. Unfortunately, in English we don't have the umlaut, so we don't have any words that start with A or I. But the air of amiable is close enough. I found that music is a very powerful way of helping students remember. I don't know if you've had this experience where you put the radio on, you hear a song that you haven't heard for 30 years, and yet you can sing along. Or in my case, not sing, but find the words at least, retrieve the words. So I've put together some activities which use music, different elements of music actually, for memory and for phonological development as well. But I want to show you here how we can use music and games as well to help students to do a lot of repetition. And in order to remember things, we actually do need to repeat them quite a lot. And that can get a bit boring unless we dress it up as something a bit more fun. So using music is a great way of doing that. And I just want to share this with you, which is using a dance rhythm to get the students repeating the letters. So we're going to practice repeating the letters of the word then, which are, we can just say in English, V-A-N. Okay? If anybody feels like they want to dance, I'm not going to stop you. The room is not exactly set up for it, but yeah, feel free if you want to. We're going to repeat this all together. Ready? V-A-N, 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 V-A-N. Yeah. Sometimes students quite like to make up their own little dance routine, particularly for the 4 and 5, which are quite funky little numbers. But it's that repetition and the rhythm, and sometimes people get a bit of movement going. All of that multisensory input helps to fix the item that they're trying to remember. And finally, some games. There are lots and lots of games we can play to support memory. This is one which is very simple to make, where I just write down the letters of words that I want my students to learn, put them out on the table. Can anybody see any familiar Swedish words? Yeah? Right. And what's really great is if you get your students to actually make the game. So you give your students just little pieces of paper, get them to write the letters of the target words, and then give them to another group to put together into words. First of all, that saves you time and preparation, which for all busy teachers is really important. But also it has the added pedagogical advantage that the students first of all have to think through these words. How many pieces of paper will I need? What are the letters? And then they have to think through it again when they get the puzzle that the other group has made. They have to think it through again. What could these words be? What Swedish word do I know that's got an A umlaut in the middle? So there's a lot of processing going on, and that is the way that we start to remember things. For your very visual learners, this is quite a nice little game as well, where I block out squares and then I ask them, what word do you think this might be? It might be then. Yeah, it might be then. Oh, it is. How do we know that? Because it's quite short, because obviously there's something going on above the letter there. All the letters are the same size. It's not like this one, which is actually a bit longer. Some of the letters drop down, some of them stick up. So it's about getting the students to focus on the shape of the word as well. This word at the top, does anybody know the Swedish word for boy? I'm looking at people who have been in this talk before. Anybody know the Swedish word for boy? No. It's actually pojke. Pojke, and you can see the boy is doing a bit of poking. Poke. So there are lots of games that we can we can bring into class. And it, anything that makes it fun, anything that's multi-sensory, that brings in different ways of fixing that information is going to be valuable for learners. I do want to talk a little bit about organisation. I think lack of organisation is a big barrier, or problems with organisation is a big barrier to learning. It's also something which really affects self-esteem. I work with older learners, as I said, sort of 18 and above. And for those students, if they forget what time class starts, or they forget to bring something to class, it can be really embarrassing for them. I know that they're not being naughty, or, it's not that they don't care. They do care, but they can't get organised somehow. And I don't know if it's the same for your students as well, that they actually feel embarrassed when they've done the wrong thing, or they've gone to the wrong place, or, and then the other kids maybe laugh or think, oh, what's wrong with you? It really erodes their self-esteem. So getting them organised, I think, is something that is very important and can be very helpful for them, not just in learning, but in their adult life as well. Particularly time management. So we can get them working with a diary. I still have a paper diary. Does anyone else have a paper diary? You're not really? No, it's a bit unpopular these days. I have a paper diary, or failing that, a calendar on the wall where you can see a whole month, and you can talk to the students about, this is when your essay is due. Obviously my learners are, university students, they've got essays due, and you can work back from that due date. This is when your essay is due. You need to print it here. You need to proofread it here. You need to finish writing here. So working back to see when they're going to get everything in. My students often lose their diaries. I have to say, it's one of the first things that they do when they get a new diary, is to leave it on the bus or something. But they never lose their phones. What is that? So using a phone is a very helpful tool. Using the calendar, setting reminders of when they have to be at a certain place. And what I've discovered is that some students actually benefit from a bit of training in how to set reminders. And I don't mean which buttons to press. I mean, I had a student who set himself a reminder for a 2 o'clock lecture, and the reminder came at 2 o'clock. So he's on the other side of town when he gets his reminder that his lecture is starting. So you need to talk to students about, you're going to set a reminder, what time will that reminder come into your phone? 1:30, yeah. So that you've got time to get to where you need to be. And I know it sounds really obvious, but actually for neurodiverse learners, things which are obvious may not be obvious. So it's worth having that conversation with them. There may be some cultural expectations around timekeeping. I work in a very multicultural environment where people from all over the world come to study. Perceptions of time are not the same across the world, not even across Europe. I do quite a lot of work in Greece. Has anyone been to Greece? Been to Greece? It's lovely, it's lovely. When somebody tells you that they're going to meet you at 9:30 in the morning, they mean it is. Sometime after breakfast will do. So being quite clear about what our expectations are of time is really important. And also help them develop a sense of how time is going by. Because if we say to students, okay, you've got 5 minutes to do this task, there will be students in the class, dyspraxic students, students with dyscalculia, dyslexic students, who don't actually know what 5 minutes feels like, what it means. So we need to help them to learn what that feels like. What does it feel like if you've got 5 minutes to finish? How long will it take me, and will I be able to do this? Or will I need to tell my teacher I can't do it in 5 minutes? Yeah. So obviously we can do that. If we've got sand timers, we can say, okay, you've got 2 minutes for this task, here's a 2-minute sand timer, turn it over, you'll be able to see 2 minutes, what it looks like, feel what it feels like. If you do that quite frequently, they begin to internalise what 2 minutes is like. So I'm going to ask you now to let me know when 2 minutes has gone by, if you would. I'm going to carry on and talk about planning. So as well as the sort of personal organisation, I do find that students often struggle to organise their ideas. They have a lot of ideas, a lot of great ideas, but often they just try and get them down on the paper as fast as possible because they are afraid of losing them. So I tell my students, well, don't write them onto the page straight away, write them onto post-it notes. Because post-it notes are not permanent. So it doesn't matter if you spell it wrong, it doesn't matter if your handwriting is not beautiful. Just capture those ideas, get them down. Then, when you've got them, you can take time to organise them. Which ideas are going to form one paragraph? Which ideas are going to form a different paragraph? Or maybe they're going to be just on their own as an introduction or a conclusion. Talking to them about how to organise their ideas so that other people can appreciate them is another great way of boosting their self-esteem. Because when people read and can see what the ideas are, and can see that this person actually is thinking in quite a creative and unusual way, then their self-esteem starts to rise as well. And I do think that collaborative learning is the way forward. So collaborative writing, getting people to work in 2s and 3s to produce text, can be very helpful for everybody. Anybody going to tell me?
Yeah.
Question has come back? So, coming back to the idea of self-awareness and our self-image of ourselves, how we understand ourselves, a lot of our self-image, I think, is determined and created by the way that other people perceive us and what is projected onto us by our family, by our friends, by our colleagues. And so one of the simplest things that teachers can do to support learners in terms of helping them to develop self-awareness and develop positive self-esteem is to project positively onto them. This is Lexi. He's a character in a comic about neurodiverse students who have adventures together. Lexi is dyslexic. He is a student who always finishes last, whose spelling is awful, who can't find his way to the classroom. But when Lexi looks in the mirror, I don't want him to see that student. I want Lexi to see this character. I want Lexi to see all the brilliant ideas that he comes out with, all the unusual ways of thinking, the problem solving. I want him to see this. And the way that I can achieve that is to tell him that's who he is. To always find opportunities to praise him for his fantastic ideas of creative thinking. Okay, doing something good, share it, say it out loud, so that their classmates also hear. Say it to their parents. I know a lot of parents of neurodiverse students only ever hear from the school when there's a problem. Wouldn't it be lovely for those parents to get an email or a phone call saying, I just want to tell you that Lexi turned up on time with all his pencils? Wouldn't that be lovely to get a positive message? And that would change the feeling in the family, the dynamic in the family would change. And the same in the staff room. If Lexi does something brilliant, instead of going to the staff room and hearing all the other teachers go, Lexi, you know what he's done today? Go to the staff room and say, do you know what Lexi did today? He came up with this fantastic idea for a story. Talking positively about the students changes other people's perceptions so that they can also project positively onto them. And so we change the way that they are perceived and that they perceive themselves. And I do think that self-esteem is a very valuable element in the learning cycle. When we have positive self-esteem, we expect more from ourselves, we are willing to put in the effort, we're less anxious. And these things lead to success, which increases self-belief and more self-esteem. It's a positive cycle. So it's definitely worth investing in. And the way that we boost self-esteem, as I said, is by helping students to understand themselves, to helping them to develop good memory strategies so they remember more, getting organised so that they can demonstrate that they do know things. Anyone know the Swedish word for friend? Excellent. And do you know how to spell it? Yeah. You're excellent students as well as excellent teachers. Well done. If you would like to know more, and it's such a fascinating subject, I could talk all day about this. If you would like to know more, do come and find me. I'll be here all day or afternoon, and I'll be very happy to chat. There's also some materials that I brought with comics and activities for raising awareness. This is a collection of activities for more memory and organisation strategies and also musical activities. If anybody happens to be in London on February the 1st, I know it's a long shot, but if you are, you're very welcome. Come along and hear some more music. I do need to give a plug to a group that I'm a member of. Is anybody here in IETAPL? The International Association of Teachers of English as a Foreign Language? Some of you. We have a special interest group called Inclusive Practices, SEN. It's a forum really for teachers to find information, to share ideas, to have a good moment. Because sometimes you do just need to let out, how you're feeling, how frustrated you are. If you want somebody to talk to, if you want to get some ideas, do get in touch with us. That's what we're there for, to support teachers. You didn't mention the MOOC. We're running a MOOC starting on the 20th of April, Dyslexia and Foreign Language Learning. It's a free online course. If you go to Future Learn and just Google dyslexia, this course comes up. It runs for 4 weeks. Some references there. I'm hoping that the slides can be shared. So there's some references there for you. And I'd just like to say thank you very much for coming along today. Teachers like you who are interested in supporting your neurodiverse learners are so inspirational. And I hope that you'll go back to your schools and share all the ideas and everything that you're picking up today. And if you do have any questions, either in English or in German, do come and find me later. Thank you very much.
Okay, auch das werde ich ganz kurz zusammenfassen. Auf Deutsch, also, Margaret Smith hat vor allem darüber gesprochen, dass neurodiverse Lerner durch einige Punkte, an denen sie arbeiten sollten und wo sie mehr Unterstützung brauchen. Aber das Wichtigste ist ihrer Ansicht nach das Selbstbewusstsein. Weil viele Kinder, also Schülerinnen und Schüler mit Lernschwierigkeiten, haben eine sehr schlechte Lernbiografie. Also das ist eigentlich eine Art Teufelskreis wirklich von, sie können schwierig lernen, es gibt viele negative Erfahrungen, dadurch sinkt das Selbstbewusstsein und das führt dann zu Angst. Und Angst führt dann natürlich wieder dazu, dass sie weniger Erfolg haben im Lernen. Und es ist deswegen sehr wichtig, bei neurodiversen Lernen darauf zu achten, dass man mit denen reflektiert, damit sie auch selber darüber nachdenken kann, was mache ich eigentlich gut. Also man muss als Lehrkraft immer mal wieder bestätigen, das hast du heute toll gemacht. Auch mit Eltern darüber sprechen, ihr Schüler, ihr Kind hat das heute richtig toll gemacht, aber eben auch mit den Lernenden selber daran arbeiten, dass sie ein Bewusstsein dafür haben, wie gut sie eigentlich gewisse Sachen machen, auch wenn viele Sachen vielleicht noch nicht so gut laufen. Das Arbeitsgedächtnis, sie hat unterschiedliche Techniken gezeigt, Wortkarten, Bilder, mnemonische Techniken mit zum Beispiel Fantasiegeschichten, dieses Big Elephants can always upset small elephants, was dann eben die Rechtschreibung von because zeigt, dass man so arbeitet, das Lied, das wir geübt haben, Rhythmus, Musik, was eben auch zu viel Wiederholung führt, was auch etwas ist, das diese Lerner unterstützt und eben sehr multisensorisch zu arbeiten. Sie brauchen auch Unterstützung in der Organisation, Selbstorganisation, wann und wo bin ich rechtzeitig da mit all meinen Papieren, Aufgaben und Schreibmaterial, das ich brauche, um am Unterricht teilzunehmen. Und eigentlich der letzte Punkt ist, dass eben Lob ist wirklich wichtig, dass man immer mal wieder sagt, du machst das richtig gut und ich freue mich, dass du in meinem Unterricht sitzt. Das ist, denke ich, die Hauptbotschaft.